Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Rude, and welcome to Rude Sports Talk, where you can get raw, uncut, uncensored analysis on today's sports, as well as vintage sports, and including professional wrestling. Which that's all this is about professional wrestling. This video. Um, Wrestlemania is a few hours away, and I wanted to get in some reviews of past WrestleManias. Just give my insight on what happened back in the days. And recent WrestleManias as well. But the first video is gonna be 1 through 12. It's not gonna be a very long video, it's just a quick retrospect of those first 12 WrestleManias, which are important, especially the first three. It was important that they get it right. So we'll start with the first WrestleMania, WrestleMania 1. That was March  31st, 1985, and it was in Madison Square Garden. This when Hulkamania was just really starting to. It hadn't peaked yet, but it was coming. This was for all the marbles. Vince McMahon put his house on the line. He put his cars on the line, everything on the line for this one pay-per-view. And that's a very ballsy move on Vince's part. And it obviously worked if we're still talking about WrestleMania in 2021. So it obviously worked. Um, it was a decent WrestleMania. The main event being Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff, with Muhammad Ali as one of the special guest referees, as well as Pat Patterson. Jimmy Snuka was in Hulk Hogan's corner. Um, Cowboy Bob Orton was in Orndorff and Piper's corner. Pretty decent main event to end the show that had lackluster ring action, but hell, it was 1985. You couldn't expect too much better than what you got. And celebrity involvement was key in this WrestleMania because they needed something to separate themselves from Starrcade. Starrcade had already had two editions in '83 and '84, and did pretty well, especially the '83 Starrcade. NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions. So it was important that the WWF create some type of competition to compete with Starrcade, and that's what WrestleMania was. And like I said, for the time, this was a pretty good WrestleMania. No major complaints about it. Nah, yeah, nothing major. No major complaints about it. I know you had the Junkyard Dog defending or going for the Intercontinental Championship against Greg Valentine. That ended in a count out. Um, One gripe I do have about the show, I guess, is Ricky Steamboat and Matt Bourne could have gotten more time. Their match was like under 5 minutes, and it should have been a little bit longer than that. And keep in mind with these reviews, I'm going with it as I remember it. I have done my research, but I'm not looking at that. I do have little notes here, but as I remember it, Ricky Steamboat, they could have, because Matt Bourne, he went on to be Doink the Clown in later years, and you know, if you can separate the gimmick of Doink the Clown from his ring work, you will see how good he was. Also notable on this show was the changing of the tag team championship. The Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov defeat Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo, who, by the way, is Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas's father, the IRS, BJ Wall Street, that guy. So Wyndham, which until I researched, I forgot that he even had a championship in WWF. So that was pretty cool to see. King Kong Bundy beat the hell out of SD Jones in 25 seconds, and but the matches don't necessarily tell the whole story with this WrestleMania. It was more about the celebrity involvement. Mr. T in the main event. Cyndi Lauper was in Wendy Richards' corner in the women's championship match. Muhammad Ali, of course, was involved in the main event. So that's what they did to separate themselves from Starcade to make it seem different from Starcade. Celebrity. Of course, you had Liberace there, and if you go back and look at pretty much any of the first 10 Wrestlemanias, if you had the VHS back in the days, or hell, if you can get your hands on the DVD now or on this fucking Peacock shit they got going on now, you will see, you gonna see the highlight of Liberace dancing at WrestleMania 1. So it was a pretty decent show. Great way to kick off really the most historic event in wrestling history, the historic series, pay per view, whatever you want to call it. Then we get to WrestleMania 2, where WrestleMania just took a fucking nosedive, if I'm being honest about it. Um, it was the three cities for me because, and I'm sure it was even worse with for the live fans than it was watching this atrocity happen. If it hadn't have been for the three cities, maybe this would have been a decent WrestleMania, but the three cities, because the problem with the three cities, besides the audio problems, that was one problem. Also, they built every main event of each one of those three cities, which were Uniondale, New York, Chicago, Illinois, and Los Angeles, California. They built the last match of each one of them cities as a main event, and that shit. Mm-mm. So it's like they were trying to have a triple main event, and they didn't have enough talent on the roster for that shit. I don't even. I guess Vince got so excited. It's seems like the WWF was trying too hard to capitalize on the success of WrestleMania 1. That's what it seems like to me. Because the main event in New York was fucking Mr. T beating Roddy Piper by disqualification in a boxing match. A boxing match. So that kind of tells you all you need to know about the show in New York. It was just shit. It was a shit show in New York. Chicago was better. They had Andre the Giant winning the Battle Royal, the NFL Battle Royal, which that wouldn't fly today. Not him winning, but the NFL players. It was half WWF wrestlers, half NFL superstars, and it worked back in 1986. So for the time, it was straight. It was cool. Probably won't age too well. Besides the fact of Andre the Giant winning, which is the namesake, of course, of the Battle Royal that I guess they had on SmackDown last night. Wish I'd have known that beforehand. I would have paid more attention. But that was decent. You had a pretty good tag team championship match. The British Bulldogs beating the Dream Team, Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. That was pretty good. That was the main event in Chicago. That was a decent affair. Then you get in LA, you get the main event, which was the main attraction for Los Angeles. You get the cage match with Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy, which was a decent match, probably the best you could expect from Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy. And actually, when you picture it, it may actually be better than it sounds. It was a decent way to end a pretty shit show because of them three cities. But if they had that in one venue, I think that would have probably saved that WrestleMania from being as bad. And I'm not talking about Michael Jackson bad. I'm talking about bad as it was. But they will make up for it in WrestleMania 3. You got Hogan and Andre. You got the irresistible force against the immovable object. You really didn't get that big, no bigger than that in 1987 in Pontiac, Michigan, right outside Detroit in the Silver Dome. That's the match that everybody came to see. For the WWF Championship, you got Hulk Hogan undefeated for. Oh no, he had held the championship for 3 years, so he walking in, reigning, defending Intercontinental. I mean, I'm sorry, WWF champion. Then you got Andre the Giant, who was undefeated for 15 years, so something had to give, and it was Andre the Giant, and his back was already given. So you know, this is was the start of Andre the Giant's health problems, and they would just spiral and spiral for the next 3 years of his career until he ultimately retired. But we'll get to that. Um, but yeah, it was a good. That was a historic WrestleMania. Could be the greatest WrestleMania of all time, actually. It's definitely up there. It's definitely a top five WrestleMania for sure. I'm sorry, it's a top three WrestleMania for sure. I have no doubts about that. Y'all can tell me your opinion on pretty much anything I talk about. You can tell me your opinion on that in the comments. But I think it's definitely a top three WrestleMania, if not the greatest WrestleMania of all time. But that's not the match though that people left talking about. People left WrestleMania 3 talking about Steamboat and Savage for the Intercontinental Championship. It went 15 minutes, which was pretty good, a good time at the time for a match of that caliber. This is back when the Intercontinental Championship was very important. It would see better days, and then it would see way worse days. But these were good days for the Intercontinental Championship. And thanks to Steamboat and Savage, they put a little extra boost to that championship with their match. This was one of the greatest Intercontinental Championship matches in history. Not just WrestleMania, but in history. Of course, one of the greatest WrestleMania matches in history, and one of just the greatest matches in history, in the history of wrestling. Um, Fans in the United States had not really, or in North America for that matter, had not really seen a match like that yet. In 1987, and this is just from people that I talked to that were around back then. I was about to turn 1 years old back then, but you would never really, if you go back and watch tapes before that of WWF, you weren't seeing action like that, like what Steamboat and Savage did on that day. And then you also had a pretty decent undercard. You had Danny Davis and the Hart Foundation against British Bulldogs and Tito Santana. That was a pretty good six-man tag. You had a good opener with the Can-Am Connection, which was Rick Martel and Tom Zink. Them versus the Dream Team again. Greg Valentine, I love Greg Valentine. He's a damn Brutus beefcake for me. I just never got it with him. And then we get a double dose of him that night after the Her versus Her match with Roddy Piper and Adrian Adonis, which was a solid match. And at the time, that was supposed to be Roddy Piper's retirement match, and he would stay out of the ring for 3 years after that. But it was a pretty solid match. I underestimated Adrian Adonis. I never really thought much of him until I just went back and watched that match kind of closely. He was actually decent to be out of shape and to have that little feminine gimmick he had, which was odd, especially in 1987. But it was they love this shit today. But yeah, back in 1987, you didn't really see too much of that. They just had some iconic moments too, like Hillbilly Jim. I believe it was what's his name, the Heidi Kid. Basically, it was Hillbilly Jim and a couple of little guys, midgets, if you will. Don't want to call them that, but little guys against King Kong Bundy and his little guys. And on paper, that sounds like a shit match. And the action in the ring was, for the most part, but you get King Kong Bundy going into business for himself and squashing the Heidi Kid, putting a big splash on him. And even his teammates who were little people, they turned on him. So everybody turned on King Kong Bundy in that match, and that was savage what he did to that young man. Especially back in 1987. This is pre-Attitude. This 10 years before the Attitude Era. So you saw some brutality back then, but that was just heinous. That was just heinous what King Kong Bundy did. So that was I guess it scared the hell out of me. When I saw it for the first time, I was a little boy. But you had a decent undercard. You had a excellent Intercontinental Championship match. You had a passable WWF Championship match, but the hype alone was going to get that championship match, the WWF Championship match, over by itself. And then you have Hogan body slamming Andre for the iconic moment, which that was not the first fucking time that Andre the Giant was body slammed either. Um, they need to stop this shit. But I guess let them have it. You put on a good show, you can get away with a few things, and this was a great show. Iconic show, one of the best pay-per-views, period, that the WWF has ever produced. And like I say, arguably the greatest WrestleMania of all time. And then just little small things like Aretha Franklin playing the piano, singing the Star Spangled Banner, and then you had the small rings, the ring carts where the wrestlers, were coming down to the ring. So just nice little thing. That visual of that stadium is amazing, especially back in the days where I believe that because there was an indoor attendance record for a very long time, and just a nice visual. Then you get to WrestleMania 4. Once again, this is the second time that Vince McMahon tried too hard to capitalize on the success of a previous WrestleMania. He did it with WrestleMania 2. He did it again with WrestleMania 4. Even though WrestleMania 4 was okay, the tournament was just too much for me. And the reason why is because when you have a 14-man tournament, that limits the amount of time that the matches are going to be tremendously. If they were going to have that tournament, it should have been 8 people, and those 8, if it was me, it would have been Hogan, Andre, DiBiase, Savage, Rick Rude, Jake the Snake, Steamboat, Valentine, Greg the Hammer Valentine. That would have been my 8. You couldn't go wrong with that 8. But nonetheless, we got what we got. 14-man tournament. Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan get a bye because they were the last 2 WWF champions. You had the deal on the main event where Hogan was cheated out of the title by crooked referee Earl Hebner, believe it or not. Twin brother of Dave Hebner, who was supposed to be the referee. And after the match, Andre the Giant sells the WWF Championship to Ted DiBiase. Jack Tunney says, hell no, you can't do that. We're going to have a tournament for this damn championship. And that's exactly what happened. You got a lot of short matches out of it. Some of the tournament action was decent, like Valentine and Savage. That was decent. The action between Hogan and Andre in this one may have been a little bit better than the action at WrestleMania 3. But we had already seen the match twice before this. And then just the double disqualification ending. You hype up fucking Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, and you have a fucking double disqualification. So both of them eliminated. That didn't sit too well with me. You had a pretty good tag team championship match with the Demolition and the Strike Force. Demolition started their historic tag team reign at WrestleMania 4. You had the opening battle royal which is important as well because Bret Hart turns face, and he has that face run for 9 years. So that's a nice little piece of history. Bad News Brown turned his back on Bret Hart and threw him over the rope. Bret Hart gets back in the ring, whoops his ass, and destroys the trophy to win the Battle Royal. And this was also notable for the WrestleMania debut of the Ultimate Warrior, which he would start on a pretty decent WrestleMania run by beating Hercules on that night. So WrestleMania 4 was okay. It wasn't terrible. The only thing that really dampened it was the tournament. Just like I say, I have no problem. I don't want to see a 14-man tournament on television ever again, much less WrestleMania. I don't want to see it on TV in one night. That's just too much for one night. Wrestlers don't get the time to have a good match and tell a story, and also the fans don't get a chance to be invested into short matches. You got WrestleMania 5, which is in the same place. Both of these pay-per-views took place in Trump Towers and or Trump Plaza, whatever the hell he was calling it, in Atlantic City. In this one, you have you get the memorable sec. This was mainly about the mega powers exploding. Um, Hulk Hogan helps Macho Man win the championship tournament at WrestleMania 4. My fault. I forgot to mention who the main event and who won the tournament. The main event of WrestleMania 4, I'm gonna rewind a little bit, was Savage and DiBiase, and to me, that is one of the most overrated main events in history. Not saying it was bad, but it was just overrated considering the talent that was involved. But considering the circumstances, I would give it a pass because, like I say, it's a tournament. And that's just a prime example when two wrestlers, great wrestlers, in DiBiase and Savage don't get the proper time that they need to tell a story in the ring. Because that should have been at least 15 minutes. And for them to tell a story, and it would have been an awesome match. And then another problem with the match, besides the time limit, it was overbooked. You don't have to overbook Savage and DiBiase. They overbooked it with Andre the Giant the whole damn match. And then Hulk Hogan comes, Miss Elizabeth goes back there and gets Hulk Hogan and he comes and helps Savage win the title. You know, that would have been better one on one. Whoever wins, wins. But now, in hindsight, they'll just build up for WrestleMania 5, as I mentioned. The Mega Powers explode. Excellent, excellent WWF Championship match to end the show with Hogan and Savage. Excellent. You really don't get too much better than that. You've had better WrestleMania main events, but it's not that many that are better than that. But that was a great one. Even though you had the sense that Hulk Hogan was going to win the belt back, you know, Macho Man had turned heel 2 months prior to this event. He accused Hulk Hogan of being jealous of him, wanting the belt back, trying to get Miss Elizabeth. He basically said some true things about Hulk Hogan. Now that I think about it. Hmm. But Hulk Hogan wins the belt in a great championship match here. Um, this was the debut of Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, and I think Shawn Michaels had an okay career. I think he did all right, I guess. And you can see signs of his greatness here, even in the match with the Rockers and the Twin Towers, which were the Boss Man and I-XII. Pretty serviceable match, and you had other serviceable matches on this show too. The most serviceable of the serviceable matches would be the Intercontinental Championship match with the Ultimate Warrior and Ravishing Rick Rude. Um, that was the Warriors' best match up until that point. Once again, back to back years where you have good Intercontinental Championship matches, although it was not on the level of Steamboat and Savage, it was some decent action in there that night. Ravishing Rick Rude wins the Intercontinental Championship from the Ultimate Warrior. This is the Ultimate Warrior's first loss in the WWF. And they would have a better Intercontinental Championship match, in my opinion, at SummerSlam of the same year, 1989. So, you know, you had two pretty good tag team matches, I think. Even though the Brain Busters, which are Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard versus the Strike Force, Rick Martel and Tito Santana, it was more about the angle than the match, but it was a decent match for what it was. Rick Martel turns on Tito Santana and will go on to become the model Rick Martel. Maybe I think that was a year later, if I'm not mistaken. And so you had some pretty good. Then you also had Greg Valentine and the Honky Tonk Man versus the Hart Foundation. That was another good tag team match. It was a little poetic justice in that one with Jimmy Hart throwing the megaphone. I think the Honky Tonk Man was intended to catch it, but Jim Neidhart intercepted it, busted him with it. So a nice little call back to the Hart Foundation's heel days in that match, which was decent. Um, but then you had some bad stuff on the show too, like the Bushwhackers and the Rugo brothers, Haku and Hercules opening the show. Jake the Snake and Andre the Giant, that was bad. You had who else was there? You had Bad News Brown and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. That was bad. And bad is okay. A bad match every here and there is okay. The problem with some of these matches, they just went on too long. They were bad matches that went on too long. If you keep the bad things short, it's they can be looked over. And this was a Wrestlemania, just like Wrestlemania 4 had 16 matches. This one had 14. That's just too many matches. But the matches that were supposed to get, at least unlike Wrestlemania 2, at least the matches that were supposed to get a decent length got a decent length. And that, to me, makes this Wrestlemania okay. It was It was better than Wrestlemania 4. I know that I'll say that it was better than Wrestlemania 4. It's just that the bad things weren't kept short, and then some of the good things were kept short too, like Owen Hart or the Blue Blazer and Mr. Perfect. Of course, Owen Hart being the Blue Blazer. That could have been a nice little 9, 10 minute match or something, but they decided to give that time to the Bushwhackers. Then you had Demolition retaining the tag team championships, which at the time, up until this point in WrestleMania history, that was rare. I think that was the first time where the tag team championships were defended that they did not change hands. So that's another stripe for the Demolition right there. Not the best of matches, but just seeing Mr. Fuji get his ass whooped, get put in the decapitation device at the end, that was worth watching the match. It wasn't too long either, so that also saved it. So that's a WrestleMania that was the main event lifted his rep. It's one of those WrestleManias. Then you get to WrestleMania 6. Now this was a one match show right here. Oh yeah, back to WrestleMania 5. I'm sorry. I, I almost forgot about the Roddy Piper segment with Robert Downey Jr. That was an iconic moment, and that's why moments sometimes make WrestleMania special, and not just the matches. Because the Piper's Pit, I think it was his first Piper's Pit in 2 years, and it was at WrestleMania 5, and he blew Robert Downey Jr. out with the fire extinguisher. So that was a great moment for WrestleMania, and that also boosted his rep as well. So you get to WrestleMania 6, like I say, this was a one match show. This was all about the Ultimate Challenge. This was all about Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior, title for title. Warrior regained his Intercontinental Championship at SummerSlam. Hogan, of course, won the WWF Championship at the previous WrestleMania. In a pretty good match, considering the fact that these are not two technicians. But it also shows that you don't have to be a great technician to put on a good match. And this was a good match. You had power, you had the hype around it. And just like Hogan and Andre, when you have that much hype in a match, it lifts it up a lot. Um, and this was one of those cases. The crowd was nuts. They were awesome. They were divided. This is the first face versus face WrestleMania match ever, I think. So just great stuff. The Ultimate Warrior wins. It was supposed to be Hogan passing the torch to him, and I still believe to this day that was the right decision to put the belt on the Ultimate Warrior because he was red hot at the time. You had to pull that trigger eventually. Um, this was Andre the Giant's last WWF match. Him and Haku lose the tag team championships to the Demolition. So this is the Demolition third reign as champion, which it would be a while before someone else won the belt 3 times, and they were able to do it at WrestleMania 6. This was shortly before their heel turn. They were still faces here. And the rest of the card was all right. It was just, like I say, it was just all about leading up to the main event. And the undercard did a pretty decent job of leading up to the main event in this one. Um, it was a pretty decent show. Of course, that main event had to be good though, because if that main event was not good, then that WrestleMania wouldn't be as high on a lot of rankings as it is. So it was then also notable. Roddy Piper painting half his body black. I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was funny. And Bad News Brown was a heel. You had to do something to piss him off. That wouldn't fly today as well, but I think for the times and I mean sometimes you just gotta have a good laugh. Get the Wrestlemania 7. Now this was another decent Wrestlemania. I think you did have a couple of filler matches that really didn't belong there. It's notable for, of course, the Undertaker's first Wrestlemania match. He starts his streak. The Demolition. I think this was their last major pay per view match, but this time it was Smash and Crush, and they lose. I'm still trying to figure that one out. They lost to, I can't even pronounce their names, but I know one of the guys was really big in Japan. So in hindsight, I guess that may not have been a bad move, with the exception of the fact that I never saw that tag team on TV again at that time. Now this is when I first started watching wrestling, so I never saw the tag team again. But they beat the Demolition. Now they beat the most dominant tag team in WWF history up until that point, and you never see them again. Whatever. Um, this was a little bit after the Gulf War had ended, but they were still milking the hell out of it with Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter. Now, the original intention for WrestleMania 7 was for it to be at the Los Angeles Coliseum, which would have held like 100,000 people, but the WWE story is that they were afraid somebody was going to snipe Sergeant Slaughter in the main event, but I've been heard much more believable stories about the buy rates being down and tickets not selling as Vince Man thought they would. I believe that. Um, but you get a pretty decent WWF Championship match out of that with Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter. The best you was gonna get out of Sergeant Slaughter, who was the reigning champion at the time. He beat the Ultimate Warrior at the Royal Rumble. It was decent main event match. I thought, 1991 Sergeant Slaughter. He probably his last decent match in the WWF. So Hulk Hogan wins the match, of course. It's WrestleMania and walks away with the title. The match of the night, hands down, though, was the Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man Randy Savage. It was a career versus career match. It was awesome. It was even the Ultimate Warrior's tights said it's much bigger than this, and there was a picture of the WWF Championship. I wasn't looking at his ass or nothing, but it just caught my attention. The tights caught my attention. Um, and it was. And he had the knee pad, one with the Macho Man, one with the Ultimate Warrior. It was just an awesome match. An awesome match. It was an emotional roller coaster. They gave each other their best shot. That's still to this day Ultimate Warrior's best match ever. Like I say, Macho Man and Ravishing Rude always got the best out of the Warrior, and this was no different. The Ultimate Warrior wins, Macho Man, but the fans still leave happy because he reunites with Miss Elizabeth after Sensational Sherry turns on him after the match. So both men leave happy. That was storytelling at its finest. Ultimate Warrior gets to keep his career. The Macho Man gets the love of his life. That was pretty cool. That it ages better. It's aged better with my age because at the time I was 5 years old. But as I'm 35, I can understand this story between Macho Man and Elizabeth. So pretty nice. He had a pretty good opener too with the Rockers and the Barbarian and Haku. The Rockers always had good openers when they were a tag team. Then of course you got Jimmy Hart in his obsession, I guess, still with the Hart Foundation and screwing them over. The Nasty Boys. Now, this was a nice callback to WrestleMania 5 2 years prior. Jimmy Hart led team. He throw the megaphone in the ring. This time, the right man got it. I think it was Jerry Sags, bust Bret Hart with the megaphone, and Nasty Boys lead WrestleMania Tag Team Champions. Pretty good stuff. WrestleMania debut also for the Legion of Doom, Road Warriors. They beat Power and Glory. They beat the hell out of them too. I think that was like 30 seconds or a minute or something. They beat the hell out of them. But pretty good WrestleMania in hindsight. Now that I think about it, hell, I might have to go back and watch it again myself. It's been some time. I'm going off the hip with most of these Wrestlemanias. Then you get to Wrestlemania 8. It was supposed to be Hogan and Flair. And I wondered for years why they never had that match. But then I did a little bit of research. And if you think about the steroid scandal, then the picture will be a little clearer. Hulk Hogan had to get out of the limelight after WrestleMania 8. So you couldn't have him win the championship. They could have had Ric Flair beat him, though. That would not have killed anything. But then again, they were big on sending the fans home happy in these days at WrestleMania. So, and they still are in a way, but they were real big on that back then. But we got what we got. We got Hogan and Sid in the main event of WrestleMania. The only thing that the match was garbage. The match was trash. Even Papa Shango was trash. Number one, I never understood why in the hell he was down there helping Sid anyway. I never understood that in the first place. Now I understand that they was gonna put him in a feud with the Ultimate Warrior, which is an iconic moment. Him running down that aisle at WrestleMania 8, returning to the WWF for the first time in 8 or 9 months. So that was a great way to end the show, and thank the Lord, because that match was shit. But that was the only really terrible thing about this pay-per-view. It had Shawn Michaels and Tito Santana in the opener. This was also kind of the passing of the guard when you look a little closer, because you got The Undertaker beating Jake the Snake Roberts. You got Shawn Michaels beating Tito Santana for the Intercontinental Championship, which was another awesome Intercontinental Championship match. You had, I drew a blank. You had Roddy Piper and Bret Hart going over. So you can see the new generation of wrestling. You can see that coming. If you look real close at WrestleMania 8, they were starting to push the new generation. Now, the best match of the night, in my opinion, was Bret Hart. Oh, I'm sorry, not Bret Hart. And you're not going to say that often. But Ric Flair and Macho Man Randy Savage for the WWF Championship. I do see why they didn't end the show that way. I didn't understand it for a long time, but they wanted that moment with the Ultimate Warrior coming back. So I guess I can understand it. But Macho Man wins, Ric Flair is bleeding, and he cuts that promo backstage, which was awesome. One hell of a WWF Championship match. Probably the best WWF Championship match up until that point, possibly, at WrestleMania. But if you say Savage and Hogan, I can't argue with that. No, I think this one was better. But like I say, you can go with either one. But the common denominator in both of those matches is Randy Savage. He was a real staple. He was Mr. WrestleMania before Shawn Michaels was, when it came to his performance. Randy Savage was that dude. And this was also Jake the Snake's last WWF match for 4 years. And when he came back, he was a shell of himself, but we'll get to that. Then you get WrestleMania 9. The best thing about WrestleMania 9 was the scenery. The scenery was good. That's the only good thing about that WrestleMania. When your best match ends in a count out, which was the Intercontinental Championship with Tatanka and Shawn Michaels, that can't be good. With Doink and Crush, you got some decent. If you want to watch this WrestleMania for entertainment or something, then I guess that's okay. You got some entertainment on it. Then you get the Undertaker. They had a habit of throwing him in these garbage ass matches with these big men. This was the start of it, right here. Him and Giant Gonzalez. The match, the aftermath. What happened after the match was better than the actual match. That's where I had a problem. Giant Gonzalez, Undertaker wins by disqualification. Giant Gonzalez drowned him or smothered him with ether. And Undertaker came back in there and kicked his ass. But the action after the match was better than the match itself. The Steiners and the Head Shrinkers had a decent little contest, I guess. You had the tag team championship match with Money Inc. against Hogan and his buddy Brutus Beefcake again. I don't know if they really thought Brutus Beefcake was a tag team specialist or they were just trying to hide his deficiencies. But they, yeah, you had that match which ended the disqualification. Um, Money Inc. won. I would have rather seen the Nasty Boys and Money Inc. looking back on it. Then you have the main event fiasco. Yeah, Bret Hart and Yokozuna, which didn't keep in mind this is the first year where the winner of the Royal Rumble went on, where they had that stipulation in place where they go on to WrestleMania and Yokozuna won. The match itself wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. It was the aftermath of the match. Now, as a kid, I thought it was cool, but looking back on it, that was politicking at its finest by Hulk Hogan. And then the stupidity. Okay, your wrestler just won the WWF Championship. Why would you challenge somebody? Why would you put it on the line right after you won it? That makes no sense to me. But that's WrestleMania 9 for you. That wasn't a good one. That was not a good one. The scenery was good. Then the togas, that was cool. But in the WrestleMania debut of JR on commentary, that was noteworthy. But WrestleMania 10 will be a little bit better. You had the little triangle for the WWF Championship. You had Lex Luger and Bret Hart were co-Royal Rumble winners, so both of them would get their crack at Yokozuna that night. And Lex Luger loses his match by disqualification. Bret Hart goes on to beat Yokozuna, and then for the WWF Championship, then you get everybody in the back coming out there to congratulate him, which was, I think that was a shoot, but I guess there was also an apology for the WrestleMania before that. It should have been because Bret deserved it, and it was a pretty interesting story. The matches weren't great, but it was an interesting story there. Of course, in today's wrestling, there would have been a triple threat match for the WWF Championship, but that's neither here nor there, nor the thing that most people walked away talking about. Those honors belong to Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels. The first ever pay-per-view ladder match that the WWF had was awesome. You've had better matches now, but for this to be their first, they definitely exceeded expectations. You know, it was kind of brutal. You got the famous spot with Shawn Michaels flying off the ladder and hitting Razor Ramon with a splash, which you didn't see spots like that back in 1994. So that was cool, and that gets shown in every ladder match promotion that you will ever see. That clip gets shown, and it shows you how iconic that moment was and how iconic that match was. I mean, now they have a whole pay per view dedicated to tables, ladders, and chairs, and another one in Money in the Bank. So that ladder match was revolutionary. A match that doesn't get talked about that often that I thought was pretty good was Randy Savage and Crush in the Falls, whatever the fuck stipulation. It was a good brawl. I think you had to get back to the ring within 60 seconds or you lose. Macho Man wins. This was his last WrestleMania match. He ties Crush up, and Crush couldn't get back. He was tied up. um, it's also notable that this is one of the very few WrestleManias since WrestleMania 7 that The Undertaker was not present. He was nursing the injury that he had suffered right before the Royal Rumble of that year. Then we get to WrestleMania 11. What I like about WrestleMania 6, 7, and 8 was the fact that the WWE was able to put together back-to-back good WrestleManias. That did not happen here. This was, for my money, the worst WrestleMania ever. The main event was LT and Bam Bam Bigelow. Lawrence Taylor is one of the greatest football players to ever play, but he had no fucking business in the main event of a WrestleMania. I understand that they were trying to get the celebrity engagement back involved after kind of straying away from it. Um, really since WrestleMania 8, they kind of strayed away from it a little bit, but they were trying to get it back. It was in Harvard, Connecticut, WWF headquarters backyard, basically. There was really nothing good. The only thing that was passable on this show was the Shawn Michaels and Diesel match, and even that had a fucked up ending with Shawn Michaels botching the sale on the power bomb, but on the jackknife power bomb. But it was an okay match, but it was not enough to save the show. If even if it had gone on last, it still wouldn't have been enough to save the show. Like this was just shitty. When Bret Hart and Bob Backlund cannot put on a good match, it's a problem. It's a problem. The WWF at this point was just at the lowest point of his life span. This was crap. This was horrible. I guess it's noteworthy that Owen Hart wins his first championship in the WWE. Him and Yokozuna beat the Smoking Guns for the tag team belts. Yokozuna returns after being absent for some months. Everything else was just shit. It was just a rough WrestleMania to watch. I had to go back and watch it. I'm sorry, I'm still traumatized. Like this was just bad. No good matches, no great matches. If Shawn Michaels and Diesel had been a great match, like they would put on a little over a year later in one of the In Your Houses, then that still wouldn't have saved the show though. It yeah that wouldn't have. It would have saved it from being the worst. Then nine would have that honor, but it didn't happen. And who I feel bad for anybody who paid their money to see that. I'm glad we had a legal cable, but never mind. That's not important. WrestleMania 12 here. You get the Iron Man match with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels wins his first WWF Championship in overtime. A very opinion dividing match. The action was good. Me personally, I'm one of the people who think the match is overrated. Not saying it wasn't a good match, but I don't, I can't. It's hard for me to sit there and watch an hour of technical wrestling as it is. Now, if I will say this, if that was a one fall match, I probably wouldn't be feeling that way. But because I saw the actual pay per view after it had aired and after I knew the result, and when I went back and watched it, I don't know. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more if I had watched that one live. I was only what? How old was I in 1996? I was 10. Maybe I would have enjoyed it a little bit better if I had seen it live. But it's like because I guess at least then I would have been anticipating a fall or something. Which I didn't think that was a really good idea for the first Iron Man match. They should have saved that for down the road if they were going to do overtime. Not for the first one. But still a good match. Still a great match. Still an iconic match. Whether, no matter, regardless of what I say, it's still an iconic match. WrestleMania debut for Stone Cold Steve Austin. He beat Savio Vega for the first time and would be many ass whoopings that he would hand out in 1996. But at this point, he was still the ringmaster, I believe. So, I think that was for the $1 million championship. He had a decent Jake. Not Jake the Snake. Even though I think he was on the show, it was him, Ahmed Johnson, and one of their buddies against Yokozuna. Okay, it was Jake the Snake, Yokozuna, Ahmed Johnson, British Bulldog, Vader, and Owen Hart. Not too bad of a 6-man tag now that I think about it. I watched it maybe a couple months ago or something. It wasn't too bad. But you had the Undertaker and Kevin Nash, Diesel. That was a pretty good match. Better than I was expecting. They were fond of putting the Undertaker against these giants, which, like the previous year, WrestleMania 11, they put him against King Kong Bundy. Ugh, in 1995. And keep in mind, King Kong Bundy was at the first WrestleMania. But anyway, that was a good match. Undertaker kicked out, I think, 3 jackknives, hit him with the tombstone, wins, but it was good action. Pretty good action. And there was signs that the Undertaker could actually carry a wrestling match. He showed signs of that at the Royal Rumble earlier that year with Bret Hart, and he showed it again here with Kevin Nash. So some pretty good stuff. Then you had the backlot brawl with Roddy Piper and Goldust, where he was gonna make a man out of Goldust. Yeah, he whooped his ass too. But you also saw signs that Goldust was a character that could actually do a little something. It was more of a kind of a comedy thing for me, but it was fun to watch. They could have skipped that OJ Simpson shit, but it was still fun to watch though. And they get it. It was kind of brutal a little bit actually. Roddy Piper wins by default, I guess. But the Intercontinental Championship, Goldust was reigning Intercontinental Champion, and they didn't put that on the line, which I had a problem with it at the time because the Intercontinental Championship had been defended at every WrestleMania before that, but not at this one. But I can live with it. It was just a fun match. Then Roddy Piper, his full time in ring days were not there anymore. I guess he was saving it for WCW, but not bad. So that's my review of the first 12 WrestleManias. Um, Most of them were pretty good, but the quality of 2, 9, and 11 in particular, mm-mm, mm-mm. Unless you absolutely have to, I would skip those 3. The other ones have something worth watching. Those 3, mm-mm. Now WrestleMania 2, I guess if you want to go back and watch the tag team championship match, I guess. But other than that, hell no. But the other 9 WrestleManias were pretty decent in their own way, or they have something for you, I believe. So I would recommend checking those out. But please subscribe, please comment. Um, Let me know what y'all think of my opinion. You know, I'm a pretty laid back guy, so I really don't care what you say. Um, you can say kiss my ass, or you can say you the man. I really don't care. I just want you to watch. Subscribe, comment. Please let me know your opinions on these first 12 WrestleManias or either one of those 12 WrestleManias. But my name is Ryan Rude. You can follow me on Twitter. It's in the description. I will be reviewing the next 12 WrestleManias, which I believe is 13 through 24. And my name is Ryan Rude, and I'm going to holler at you.